Hi everyone, today we'll be discussing the neuromuscular junction and excitation contraction coupling. My classmates will also discuss the CBC with slide and filament theory and the rigor mortis dead fish raw chicken and how it all connects and kind of goes hand in hand. I will be discussing the neuromuscular junction and excitation contraction coupling. So what is this? This is a connection between the nervous system and the muscle system, right? For example, we have a sensory input, like we'll see a glass of water, and that kind of sends a signal to our brain, like our brain will recognize that will be, I'm thirsty. We'll just say we're thirsty, right? And our brain will send a signal out, motor output onto our muscle. And it does that with the motor neurons that we have in our brains and spinal cord connecting to our muscles and body, right? So for example, we have our brain right here. We have an upper motor neuron that connects to the lower motor neurons at the spinal cord. And those motor neurons connect to the muscle. For example, we could see right over here we have the spinal cord and we have a nerve, and in that nerve we have the motor neuron, and that axon, that tail where it actually ends, it's actually meeting with that muscle cell, right? And that place that they meet is actually called the neuromuscular junction, which is what I'll be talking about. Because of this is basically how we're able to make decisions and if we want to move our hands or not, sort of, right? So here we have an axon, that tail, and every place that it meets that muscle fiber or cell, it's called the neuromuscular junction. So here we have it again. This is what we'll be talking about, the neuromuscular junction, and this is what it looks like from a closer look right here, right? So the first step in that decision making is actually called an action potential traveling down that action terminal, right? So for example, we have an action potential that travels down the action and opens voltage gated calcium channels. They're like probably located around this area, right? And in the presynaptic membrane of that actin, so it will allow for calcium to go in there, and then calcium will enter that presynaptic membrane and cause the release of acetylcholine into the synapse by the excitosis. So that acetylcholine will be released into the synaptic cleft right over here, and what happens is that acetylcholine will actually bind to these receptors right over here. They're called the ligand sodium channels, and they open up once that acetylcholine binds to it, right? It'll open up, and sodium will be able to go through there. So what happens after sodium goes in through there? Well, that actually causes that sarcoplasm right here to become less depolarized. For example, right here, so we have sodium enters and it causes this to become less negative, right? Once that sodium channel closes, potassium actually opens and it causes repolarization because it's exiting that. So it'll keep going up and down, right? Here's a picture of the neuromuscular junction. As I was saying, the action potential will travel down, the voltage gated calcium channels will open, and then it'll allow for acetylcholine to be released into the synaptic cleft and bind to these receptors that allow sodium to go in through there. Now we have that motor end plate, right? So like I was saying, the ACH binds and opens chemically ligand gated ion channels and it'll cause an action potential to happen, and that will travel down the transverse tubules, right? The transverse tibule is basically an invagination in the sarcomere, and that will actually is kind of like a transport that once the action potential goes through there, we have this place right here that's called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and this place right here actually stores calcium. So for that calcium to be released, that action potential has to travel down, and they also have like these receptors right here that I believe are called the ryanodine receptors. So once that action potential meets, those uh, receptors will open up and allow calcium to travel into the cytoplasm of that cell, and they will bind to troponin, and then we go into the thick and thin filament with myosin, and we will get into all that with my classmate, actually, myosin and actin. But like I was saying, so we have the action potential traveling down, and we had this transverse tibule. We have the sarcoplasmic reticulum and another one. So when we have these three together, that's what we actually call a triad, right? Now, that calcium has to be released for a contraction to be able to happen. So this is what we call the excitation, contraction, coupling, which is the physiological process of converting an electrical stimulus to a mechanical response. So we can see that the excitation part will be the action potential, and then the rest what actually happens in contract once that calcium is released. And those are the steps in easy coupling. Excitation, contraction coupling is just one of the many steps for our body to move, and it'll actually happen so quickly, right, that you wouldn't know all that it actually has to go through. So there we have the thick and thin filaments, and that is all you need to know about the neuromuscular junction. I hope you understood pretty well. And now we move on to the CBC with slide and filament theory. And I hope you guys learn and enjoy this video. Thank you.